What I want to tell you, community, is something that has been happening just recently, during the last week. But each night, it has been getting worse. I live in a small 4-story building, 12 apartments, in a nice middle-class area of the city. The building is very beautiful but doesn't have an elevator, which has kept its prices accessible even for us, my sister and me, who rent an apartment on the 4th floor of this place. We like it because it's safe, because it has security 24 hours a day, and because it makes us feel secure. It made us feel secure until recently we didn't even use to lock the door of our home, but all the calm has been fading away, as I said, for the past few days. One night I got up to take some glasses that I had in my room to the sink, and I noticed my sister peering through the peephole of the door. She didn't flinch when she saw me. She continued observing intently in complete silence. I asked her what she was looking at and she signaled me to be quiet. There's an old lady dancing in front of the door. That wasn't possible. I saw the darkness under the door. When someone walks through the hallway, the motion-activated light turns on. But when my sister moved away from the peephole to let me see, I caught a glimpse of an elderly lady, very thin, in a black sweater, who was moving away until she was lost from our field of vision. As soon as she did, we opened the door. The lamps activated. There was nothing. On each floor there are 3 apartments, one near the stairs, like ours, and 2 others at the end of a hallway, whose doors face each other. The image, if I'm being honest, seemed like it came from a dream. Not a nightmare, but extremely strange. But the thing is, community, this wasn't just a dream. It's not just our imagination. Because a couple of nights ago in the building neighbors chat, the neighbor from the 2nd floor and those from the 3rd have said they've seen exactly the same thing we saw. A woman who in the early morning hours seems to dance in front of the door without activating the motion lights. Always in front of the apartments next to the stairs. The strange thing is that in this building, as I told you, we all know each other. There are very few apartments that there's no way to enter or exit without the guards noticing. And, well, there's that detail about the lamps not being activated by movement. When the guards have been notified to come up and check, they do it immediately. The lights turn on, but they don't cross paths with anyone on the stairs. We're agreeing to buy cameras, to see where this woman comes from, to explain her. When I get up at night and hear her again, there behind the door, I don't look through the peephole. But I have very strange and uncontrollable desires to open the door, to see who is behind. It's time to enter a new edition of your favorite program. The story we started with today is a taste, an extra content. But now we move on to the one that gives the title to this episode. A long, extensive story of inexplicable encounters, of confrontations with the paranormal. Perhaps, and you'll confirm this for me, one of the most impressive we've told. You'll understand why. So turn off the light and let yourself be carried away, because you're now entering tales of the night. Hello, Uriel. My name is Lila. Greetings to the entire Stories team and to the whole community, where despite all our diversities, there is always respectful treatment, welcoming, understanding. Because I firmly believe that in the face of death and the inexplicable, in a certain way, we are all equal in the world. I'm sorry for expressing myself like this, but it's my most sincere way of telling you that nowhere else will I find people who understand me like you do. My story is also a bit of a cry for help, and you'll see what I mean. I've been trying to gather courage since 2021 to send this email. I've been listening to Tales of the Night since the 33 Candles episode aired, because it was recommended to me by a friend I made over the internet. She's from Veracruz. Someday I'll travel to Mexico. It's a country that seems beautiful to me. The thing is that recently some things happened that made me revive all my memories linked to a creature that I can't understand what it is, what it wants, if it's good or bad. Anyway, I'd like to remain anonymous, so you should know that my real name is not Leela. Lila is a deformation of my real nickname, mainly because there are certain details in my story that are involved in ongoing legal investigations. I would like to tell Uriel information for the veracity of my story, but I would ask that if you were to be selected for your narration, know that I have omitted names of places and modified names of my close ones. The only thing I can leave to put you in context is that I am from Patagonia, Argentina, that lonely region, so far from the country and everything to the south, at the end of the world. Most of this story takes place there, although right now I'm writing to you from Buenos Aires. In fact, I was born in the capital, but when I did, shortly after, my dad returned to that little town in the middle of the snowy mountains from where he came. That's how my parents, the teenage couple that never was, decided to begin my endless journey of constantly traveling from Patagonia to Buenos Aires throughout my life. 2 years there, 2 years here, a year there, a year here, always intermittently traveling. Initially, my mom would accompany me to the south, and then my father would take me back, until from the age of 11 I started traveling by plane alone. That's how I got used to carrying my room in a suitcase and a backpack. That's how it always was throughout my life. The first time I witnessed the darkness that inhabits the hills around my town, I was 7 years old. My father, taking advantage of the few days my mom stayed, tried naively to have a family outing, although we never were one. My father went out to work when the sun was setting. In summer, it gets dark almost at 10 o'clock at night in this area. He picked us up from the house that at that time we still shared with my grandmother Sue. He bought sandwiches, drinks, and with the same car he worked with, he drove us to the outskirts of town. His idea was to take us to the shores of a huge turquoise water lake that is very close to the town, so we could have dinner looking at the stars. It was the year 2003. The lights of the small city were left behind very soon for my taste, and being a child, the darkness began to frighten me. The darkness seemed to swallow the landscape completely. The world behind us, the hills, like enormous masses of shadow, sank one on top of the other. Only the yellow halo of the car allowed us to glimpse a few meters of the road, with dry herbs on the sides, typical of the Patagonian tundra. Normally the darkness disturbed me, because I used to imagine monsters or faceless people surrounding me. These are normal imaginations of infants, I suppose. But that night everything felt more real, like a true threat. I started to repeat to my father that it was a bad idea to go, that we should return, but he was more busy arguing with my mother, promising to be a family in the future if she gives him a chance. Although, as I said, we never were. My father is a good person, and my mom is all the good that I have learned to be. She is my favorite person, but being honest, we don't function as a family. They were never a good couple. So being young people of just 24 or 25 years old, they proceeded to ignore me during the journey and continued arguing. We arrived at the site. As soon as the engine stopped, the silence was deafening, barely interrupted by the sound of our breathing, in addition to the breeze that passed through the field. When we opened the doors, I heard the murmur of the waves on the shore of the lake. I walked a bit on the ground full of stones, while my mother and my father took a blanket, the food out of the car, and tried to feel with their feet for a spot without branches or large stones to sit on. My stomach lurched upon perceiving a deep echo in the distance. It was the first time I heard that thing emit a sound, that sound with which today, at 28 years old, I still have nightmares. "It's a cow, daughter." My dad laughed. I couldn't even turn towards him. The darkness was impossible to fathom. The sky full of stars, without a hint of light pollution, seemed an immensity that was coming down on us. Added to the noises, the distant noises, I finally broke into hysterical crying, begging them, pleading with them to leave. I felt we were in danger. I felt it in my gut. My mom tried to hold me, but I backed away trembling to the open door of the car. Breathless, I called my parents crying. The tension curled my nerves, so I squeezed my knees with my arms in the back seat. My parents finally scolded me without understanding what was happening to me. My dad was offended, as if I hadn't appreciated his gesture of taking me to see the Milky Way. But that wasn't what terrified me. The deep snorts, which were prolonged much longer, thicker, and I would even say distorted, couldn't be from a simple cow. I was crying non-stop until at some point I fell asleep. I was awakened by a crash, my parents hurrying into the car. Before starting the engine, 2 bangs startled me. Bangs on the ground, which made the car vibrate, as if something really huge and very heavy was stepping nearby. My dad whispered to me like an euphonic shout, "Get down, don't look out." And he covered my head with his jacket. The car started. My dad didn't wait for the engine to warm up, as was prudent, necessary to be in those freezing night temperatures. He accelerated, backed up to get out of his parking spot on the shore, and went up to the highway with the screech of the tires on the pavement at an imprudent speed. Then a snort shook me completely. A snort that sounded very close. Too close. I was so petrified with fear that I couldn't even cry. I even remember holding my breath. We arrived at my grandmother Sue's house. My mother was pale and so disturbed that she lifted me in her arms, despite being 7 years old already. I wasn't that small. She carried me like a baby and squeezed me in her arms. I could feel her fear. Grandmother Sue came out, and before my dad could say anything, she slapped him in the face. A blow that I will never forget. She yelled at him that it was a moonless night, that he knew perfectly well that you shouldn't leave town on a moonless night. And that marked me, almost like a sort of golden rule that I should never break. That's how several years passed without my daring to go out of town at night, until I was 13, and my dad once asked me if I wanted to go on an adventure. We were storing materials as he was building his house a few streets up the hill from my grandmother Sue's. One Saturday at 12 at night, my dad grabbed the car keys and pulled me by the arm playfully. I went outside with some nervousness, checking the full moon, circular and white, that looked like a huge light that illuminated the hills around. I asked him where we were going, and my dad, with a conspiratorial smile, said, "Let's go to the hill. You shouldn't be afraid of nature, Leela. Not being from here. From where we are." He drove for half an hour down the highway, leaving the town this time from the opposite end from where we left when I was little. The full moon illuminated the lawn, extending the shadow of the mountains with snowy peaks that seemed to press their skirts against the narrow asphalt where we were going. My dad noticed I was nervous and started telling me that his younger brother, my Uncle Ali, had been getting into strange things. All I knew was that he had been diagnosed with schizophrenia, that he was kept medicated, but my father was sure that medical science couldn't help him. What was tormenting him had nothing to do with his head. He was saying these things, and I started to rub my hands, scared. But then he told me that he wanted me to be strong. Never let yourself be convinced by people who promise to get everything easily, because you end up paying a much higher price than all the hours of your life working for your goals, my father told me. I listened attentively because he seemed to want to hide his anguish. We parked on the roadside. On the sides of the highway, grasses taller than me swayed from side to side in the strong winds. Just like that, my dad lifted a part of the wire fence and made a gesture like a butler, saying ladies first. I tried to laugh, but I crossed and began to make my way in the grass, quite scared. My dad took me by the arm, and as he exceeded the height, he began to guide us towards the nearby hill. It's a quite famous hill, with a cave formation on one side. To reach them, you had to climb a rocky wall. We started climbing quietly, my dad always behind me to protect me in case of a fall, always well illuminated by the opaline light of the full moon. When we were at the beginning of the precipice, with the enormous caves at our backs, my dad spoke again. In these places you could come to see people who are no longer in this world, but can still be seen. Can you imagine turning to look, and there's an Aboriginal chief behind you? What would you do? He began to say as if joking, although he turned serious again and continued. There are many things that have no explanation in this world, but if you give them your fear, those things will be able to control you. Your Uncle Ali doesn't understand anything. Never believe what he says, and above all, don't let him scare you. Your Uncle Ali only has the emotion of fear left. He is already empty. He started telling me about a girlfriend he had after meeting my mother in a period of 2 years when I was doing preschool in Buenos Aires. She died of cancer, being very young. He only knew that her ashes were scattered from a boat in the middle of the lake. He went to the shores, near where they threw her remains, asking for her to present herself. He shouted, begged, and challenged her to return, to manifest herself before him. But nothing ever happened, he told me. I never felt her presence. I never heard anything. I never saw anything. I must admit that what my dad told me caused me quite a bit of admiration. Despite my fear, I nodded. As soon as we returned, although it was very late, almost dawn, we found my grandmother Azuna at the little wooden gate of my father's new house. She, always thin and with a mane of red-dyed curls, was smoking a cigarette and clutching her shawl over her shoulders. As soon as we parked, she approached and said very seriously to my dad, "Alice escaped from the hospital." My father looked at me, worried, and said, "Get out and wait for me at the house with your grandmother." After that night, community, my dad never spoke to me about the matter again. He never spoke to me about paranormal things again. When I returned at 14, he had already finished half of his house, and I was surprised that he built an attic. That's where the water tanks, the heater, and a room for storing boxes were hidden. Once I dared to ask my father what they were, and he ended up confessing that they were things from that girlfriend he had before, the one who died of cancer. I was frozen. Her clothes, her stuffed animals, her books, all her things were up there. Dad's house was cold, dark, and objects always had static electricity. I could cover an entire separate account of all the things that lived in that house, but I can summarize them. Being under the trapdoor of the attic and hearing footsteps above my head, hearing a female voice singing, feeling the doorknob shaking desperately, footsteps that were easy to perceive on a wooden floor, as well as the dragging of chairs. That's why I preferred to spend my afternoons at my grandmother Sue's house. I didn't like to stay alone much if my dad wasn't there. I would take the PlayStation, carry it in my backpack, and wait for my father, who would come from work and pick me up. He no longer made trips with his car. For several years, as a forest firefighter, he started working in the nearby national park. I saw very little of my Uncle Ali. When he appeared, he was like a ghost of the person he once was. When I was a baby, he liked to carry me in his arms everywhere. He was affectionate and played with me. He had been an uncle from a very young age, practically a teenager. But now he was a person of sickly thinness, with a face that denoted the edges of his skull. He would arrive at my grandmother Sue's house, sit in the middle of the living room, and let himself be splashed with water that my grandmother prepared by boiling certain plants. She ground seeds, applied oils, and boiled everything with branches of plants. She splashed my uncle and recited prayers. Then she would sit in front of him and begin to pray, with a wooden rosary that wrapped around her hands and my Uncle Ali's wrists. Sometimes I would sit near them to pray too, but the dense sensation that emanated in the place always ended up suffocating me. Everything was going relatively normal as a unit until I reached the age of 16 and met someone. A boy, whom I'm going to call by his childhood nickname, Mint. They called him Mint. I don't exactly remember why. I should never have spoken to that damn psychopath. Mint represented a turning point in my existence where everything started to go from bad to worse. He introduced me to his gang, a group of kids who initiated me into cigarettes, alcohol, marijuana. Some of them were even rustlers, those who dedicate themselves to stealing cattle. One boasted about how many horses he had stolen, which were transported and illegally resold in other provinces. I got to know certain bars in the area, where you can imagine the kind of seedy vibe they gave off. I stopped trying at school. I started fighting with my parents. I thought I could take on the world. Mint always seemed to know everything. Once, when we smoked in a circle and passed around 2 bottles of whiskey, he approached my ear and whispered, pointing to the one who stole horses, "That poor Christian is going to end up with his head broken, open, scattered on the asphalt." I looked at Mint with some disgust, but he shrugged. "Don't you believe me?" he challenged. "If it's a joke, it's not funny, Mint. Learn new jokes." I said, trying to pretend that what he had said didn't affect me at all. But Mint smiled in a way that always caused me fascination and, at the same time, alarm, with that face as if he knew everything, even about me. "What do you want to bet? If it comes true before the end of the year, you're going to do me a favor. Is that okay?" "Sure." As I wanted to be strong, not to be less because of my place as the only woman in the group, I accepted. I can't find screenshots of the news because of the years that have passed, but in 2013, there was a police chase in the neighboring town. The car ended up losing control and crashing against one of the gigantic rocks that usually appear near the highway. The person who was on the passenger side was ejected, hit his head against the asphalt, leaving only a mess of his body. It was exactly as Mint had told me. It happened while I was in Buenos Aires. When my Aunt Abel, my father's only younger sister, told us after her brief vacation visit to my grandmother Sue, a chill petrified me in my place. I checked Facebook. I had a message from Mint. "See? You're going to have to do me that favor." It's worth noting that that same year my dad had a traffic accident, overturning the van where he and his national park team were going. But fortunately, everyone came out unharmed. It was a bit difficult for me to travel back there at 17, especially because I had met someone very special to me. We said goodbye crying like idiots at the airport. I had forgotten about the Mint issue until a few months later, he appeared at the iron gate of my father's house. He looked very deteriorated. One of his eyes had partially yellowish, sickly sclera. He smelled of alcohol and a bit of urine. His clothes were disheveled, dirty, and quite underdressed for walking in the first snows of the year. I exhaled all the air inside me with annoyance at seeing him. I had distanced myself from everyone, but there was Mint, waiting. "Did you think I was going to forget?" he asked me, dragging the words with difficulty. It seemed that drugs had eaten his brain. I couldn't disguise the disgust and mistrust, so he told me, "I'm not going to touch a hair on you. You're horrible." Beyond feeling offended, I was actually relieved that he said that. Although, of course, now that I'm an adult, I know I was still in danger, but being a teenager who thought I knew everything, at that moment I decided to go with him. What kind of favor would he ask me for? To help him steal? To buy him drugs? This is a part that's hard for me to relive. I'm not a good narrator, and part of my mind somewhat refuses to remember. But I remember the streets as night was falling, the orange light of the city reflecting on the hills around. As we walked towards an avenue down the hill, passing through shortcuts between the dry undergrowth typical of the tundra, I saw my little cousins passing in the distance, the 3 little children of my Uncle Ali, who were walking in line with small bags from the market. They seemed scared and ran in the opposite direction without giving me time to greet them from a distance. Mint hurried me and lit a cigarette without stopping walking. I wrapped myself in my black jacket and looked at the time on my cell phone, thinking that maybe I would arrive before my father from work and that he wouldn't worry. We walked for half an hour in complete silence until we reached some streets that I knew were in the direction of the lake. In the wee hours, I almost didn't recognize them, but it was the path we took for that nocturnal picnic that ended abruptly when I was 7 years old. When I heard it for the first time. "If you don't tell me where we're going, I'm leaving," I cut Mint off, trying to hide that I was in panic. I had never returned to that area since then. Thousands of times I returned to the lake, but never by those paths, and Mint laughed at me, pointing at me with the cigarette. That you should have asked a year ago," he told me. "Seriously, I'm leaving. I'm taking off. I threatened him, and he approached me looking at me sideways. Like someone inspecting a device they don't know how to operate. Wherever you want to go, I'll catch up with you. There's no one in this part who can or wants to help you. Stop complicating it. Follow me quietly." Officially under threat, I continued walking, almost crying with fury. I would have wanted to have something to defend myself with and run. But Mint was right. I was neither faster nor stronger than him. We arrived where the lights of the constantly growing city no longer reached. The darkness was beginning to eat everything around. The silence was isolating until only the whistle of the wind remained. That constant wind of Patagonia. Mint walked quietly and suddenly he squeezed my arm, to which I had to back away. But he made a gesture for me to keep quiet, and I better cooperated. Crossing a small ridge that divided the stony path from the shore of the lake, the silhouette of a bonfire could be seen. Mint lay on the ground, and I imitated him, ending up like spies flat on the ground. I whispered, "What the hell do you want me to do? Tell me once and for all if you'll leave me alone." He smiled and made a gesture with his head towards the bonfire. "Go say hello from me." His smile no longer fascinated me. Rather, it gave me dread. It was sinister, disfigured, with rotten teeth. I felt a lot of repulsion, but he pushed me again in the direction of the lake. I was surprised that there was no one. I thought that surely the bonfire had been prepared by Mint, that he just wanted to scare me, intimidate me, or rob me in the worst case. So I got up and went without even hiding or being careful not to make noise. "Hello. The idiot Mint sends me. I'm already here." "How fun. Can't you see with a tone of mockery?" Quite fed up with the tense situation I had gotten myself into. I should never have left my house. I should have set my father's St. Bernard dog on him, or called the police to scare him away. A splashing sound in the lake made me jump with fright. Then another coming from the hills. Then another. And another. Yes, it would have to have an extreme speed to move from one side to the other, as if they were many people approaching. I looked in all directions and I caught Mint's laughter, but much, much further away than I thought, so he was surely running from there. He was escaping. I tried to go back the way I came, but the sounds of footsteps among the stones made me back away. Darkness was worse. The closer I was to the bonfire, the light barely illuminated the rocks that contained the burning logs. I think I fumbled for a stick to wield, while the footsteps approached me from all sides without me being able to do anything. A roar rose behind me, a deep, cavernous one, reverberating in my gut with a frightful vibration, distorted and horrible snorts that right now fill my eyes with tears of dread as I remember. Because it wasn't just a snort like a bull's, the noise of an ox or something similar, because that thing spoke. The voice was super hoarse, forceful, like something that was straining to make itself understood. No paranormal event I've experienced compares to it. and I've had the dead ride me many times. I've felt my feet leave me. I've felt two hands touch me while living completely alone. Nothing compares to it. Hearing that thing talking, approaching in my direction with a dozen other footsteps of creatures running in circles surrounding me. I crouched down, hugging my knees, like when I was a child starting to cry with dread. I could perceive the vibration on the floor, the vibration of something extremely heavy going slowly. Again, a bit lower and more defined, but definitely what was talking to me wasn't human. A shriek from Mint disoriented me, making me jump from the path where I came. A dark silhouette appeared running towards me, someone totally bald and of famished thinness. It was my Uncle Ali. He had a knife in one hand and grabbed me by the arm without stopping running, dragging me towards a corner of the circle. We started running together, splashing in the frozen water of the lake. The cold was starting to break my feet, but he wasn't willing to slow down. My Uncle Ali makes an effort to speak to me clearly, repressing the cough and the discomfort of the effort of someone who can barely stand. We reached the area of the coast that finally had orange lighting from the highway. We climbed the hill, and only when we climbed the concrete shoulder did we stop to catch our breath. My Uncle Ali hurriedly put away his knife and without any shame held me and hugged me, trembling, terrified. I was still in a state of panic, corresponding to the hug, but as if I couldn't leave behind the total darkness from where we came. We didn't stop for long. My Uncle Ali let go of me right away, and we started walking, looking back from time to time. I didn't dare to ask about Mint. I didn't want to know either. After a half-hour walk, we arrived at my grandmother's house, where my dad was waiting, sitting at the table. I never saw him so angry with me, but he didn't scold me. He just hugged me. He made the gesture of giving a slap, a blow, but he contained himself. My grandmother Zuma took me to the bathroom. She wet my hair with warm water that had a pleasant sandalwood aroma. She was praying under her breath as she combed me while covering all my long hair with the water and then starting to shake my clothes with dirt. When I came out of the bathroom, neither my dad nor my Uncle Ali were there. My grandmother directly took me to the sofa, gave me a change of clothes and told me to lie down. She woke me up at dawn. She made me put on boots and a coat over my pajamas. And my dad picked us up in the car. We went to the police station. I don't want to go into details, community, but Mint was in jail. My dad had to spend a night detained in the cell too. My Uncle Ali was there. Things were released. My dad and my uncle had no further repercussions, and no criminal case was opened against them either. Everything was left as a fight to defend me. Although I think if my cousins hadn't seen me, Ali's children, maybe I wouldn't even be here today writing this story. Despite everything, I felt extremely guilty during that day. My grandmother Zuma took me to the lake from the other end, from the southernmost side, where we always went as a family to spend afternoons, where the crystalline water didn't cause me fear. We bought coffees and croissants. We walked along the shore among the stones and sat down. She was very serious, and I knew that any scolding that came to me I would deserve. But then she took off her shoes and started walking towards the water. She entered barefoot despite the freezing temperature, despite the fact that those turquoise waves came from the melting of the mountains. She walked, wetting her skirt, her thermal stockings up to her knee. Her red mane floated in the wind. Yes. At that moment, I understood the rumors. The rumors in the town about my family were true. The ladies who came to my grandmother's house. The accusations on social media. The whispers behind our backs when we were at the supermarket. My grandmother was a witch. I felt like a fool for realizing it only at 17. She made a gesture with her hand. I gathered my courage, took off my boots and entered the freezing water with her. She squeezed my hands tightly and told me that never, never, never should I stray from God's path. that I should never stop believing, that I should never use what is deserved to cause evil. A few more years passed to be able to summarize, to reach the conclusion of my request for help. Several consecutive deaths have been happening in my family. The pain is so much that I dare not go into details. A crime in the family shook us, where a woman was missing on the border with Chile for several days. My grandmother seemed to know in every fiber of her bones where she was, who did it, but the authorities didn't seem to want to listen to her. I was in Buenos Aires during those moments, so I couldn't do more than maintain telephone communication, more than listen to my grandmother cry with anguish for endless days. Until the victim's body was found in parts. My grandmother knew after the femicide of her niece, of which I will attach a photo of the news in the media. She lost a lot of her strength. She no longer dyes her hair red. She's thinner, smokes more cigarettes, forgets who we are, and calls me several times a year to congratulate me, although she never gets my birthday right. Investigating a bit in the town, they told me that both my grandmother Sue and my uncle Ali were paying prices for messing with something that I came to call the Minotaur, that which walks on two legs, which is enormous, which I am sure has a bull's head. After the tragedy of my aunt, my grandmother's niece, there was another incident involving my uncle Ali's ex-wife. It seems that in a fight suddenly a knife appeared and, well, she ended up being the victim. I'll also attach evidence of that. And that's how the years have been passing, where I see them deteriorate more and more each time I return from Buenos Aires. My uncle Ali is so thin that I could hug his waist and touch my elbows. All his hair fell out and he has no teeth anymore. But despite that, I notice him as at peace, like he has nothing left to lose. He is dedicating himself to his children from what he can do, of course, since he remains hospitalized, disabled by his severe schizophrenia. In 2023, after a constant streak of, let's say, bad luck, I suffered an assault near my home, and although all my life I had this sensitivity to the paranormal, I never had the desire to curse anyone. However, this robbery completely ruined me. I know who it was. I know it was a petty criminal who lives near my house in the neighborhood. Maybe I have gifts or something inherited, as my grandmother told me that time. But I never experienced feeling so much hatred towards a person, such a desire to wish the worst upon them, for them to die in a frightful way, and so much anger, so much violence. Thirst for revenge. And it's that he stole things that were precious to me. But for a thief, they have no profit. He didn't even take my cell phone, the headphones, or the tablet. Only my bag with purely sentimental belongings. So great is my hatred that I reached the point of dreaming of a place in the middle of the snowy mountains in Patagonia, a hidden enclave, where there is grass, crystalline waters, and everything seems a fountain of peace in the middle of those waters. There is always a silhouette with horns, although I can't distinguish it due to the presence of a mist that is translucent with the golden halo of the sun. I dreamed of this place several times, being seriously ill, coughing up blood, having high fever. But recently, with that uncontrollable hatred that this thief caused me, that crawling and cowardly wretch, I finally saw his face. He extended a hand to me and said it to me again. But I couldn't take his hand. I woke up and my mom had entered my house with her extra key. He held me during my coughing fit and helped me recline to the ground as I poured out a pool of blood. Since then, I've taken care of my health and improved little by little, but I struggle every day, praying tirelessly to God to guide me and help me navigate these emotions of hatred, anger, resentment, and desperation for a cruel and horrible revenge that constantly overwhelms me. I told my mother about all this. She listened to me and told me something that chilled my blood about that thorn, and makes me wonder if there is truly something evil inhabiting Patagonia. When I was 7 years old, Shortly after that night, when I heard it for the first time, my mother took me to visit an archaeological site near the town, a place about which one would prefer not to give many details. Any Argentine with knowledge of tourist areas could instantly detect which one it is. What's important is that I ended up separating from my mother, going in and out of places that were outside the security boundaries, and she found me talking to things that she couldn't see. She asked me playfully what I was doing, and I told her that I was conversing with the creatures who were the owners of the place. My mother wanted to scold me, embarrassed because a coordinator of the site arrived and she thought he would scold us for letting me cross the permitted limit. But it was he who ended up contradicting my mother. He told her not to underestimate my gifts, that as an archaeologist he could be sure that this was a sacred enclave, and that she shouldn't belittle what manifested there. And I, a little girl, was lucky enough to perceive it. What seems strange to me is that, despite the form of that which inhabits near the town, towards the northern tundra, I never heard anyone properly address it by name. I feel it would be very simple to describe it as the devil in person, but nobody does that. They say my family paid prices for their actions. But I find that we're just depressed, sick people, perhaps even sad. Yes, quite miserable. Just that. So, Uriel and community, I would like to know your opinions. Forgive me for remaining anonymous, but I promise you that if Uriel chooses my story, if he delivers my request for help to you, I will see you. I will listen to your criticisms and your recommendations. Everything you have to tell me. Stay safe. Please take care of your loved ones. Much love. And may God always bless you.